Hey there, this is Spanky the Driving Dude with All Things Driving. Thanks for playing today. Got lots to share with you. We're going to be continuing to chat about speeding and the outcome of speeding. I have a lot of stories for you today. I may or may not have some stats, but I've just been on this kick the past couple days because of some stuff that's been going on in the news. So I'm just going to get right at it and share some stories with you. I hope my editing is good today. I'm sorry if it's not. I'm the only guy in the room, so I'm trying to figure all this stuff out still. So bear with me. Thanks again. Let's get right to it. There's a story about a 25-year-old. He had a 19-year-old girlfriend. He worked for a luxury rental car agency. This is in Southern California. And he had in his possession that day a Lamborghini, and his girlfriend's in the car with him. He's unbuckled, and he decides he's going to speed at one point over 100 miles per hour. And this is in the San Fernando Valley, which is where I grew up. And he's speeding down Burbank Boulevard, flying. He ends up clipping a Jeep Cherokee and then collides into a couple trees, and basically the car is disintegrated. Both of them die. The car is in pieces. And the news story that I read was that one woman, a lot of people had stopped, obviously, and ran over to the crash scene, debris everywhere. And a woman said that she held the hand of one of the victims while they died. And it doesn't say which guy, which person, the boyfriend or the girlfriend. Then they interviewed a friend of the deceased man. The friend was supposed to be picked up at LAX airport later on that night. And he said that he kept calling his friend over and over, and his friend never got back to him. And he said that was highly unlike his friend, because his friend always got back to him, either picked up or called him right back. Truly a horribly sad story. The 19-year-old girlfriend was a student at UCLA, and it blows my mind why people decide that they're going to go ahead and speed. It's a horrible habit. It has nothing but bad outcomes to it. I know that if this driver had to, if he had those 15 seconds back, knowing what the outcome would be, he would simply slow down, obey the law, drive at a safe speed, honor his girlfriend as someone he loves. Crazy story. So, are you the type of driver who speeds habitually? Maybe it's something you need to look at. Maybe you decide I'm good. I'm gonna go 7 to 9 miles per hour over the speed limit, and I'm chilling. Hey, I'm going with the flow of traffic, man. Everybody's clearly going 78 and a 70. Yeah, well, not everybody does that. Maybe you should get out of the fast lane, maybe get out of the number 2 lane or 3 lane and move it on over to the number 4 lane and just chillax. I mentioned in another episode, I think it was on speeding, that, in a 70, I'm just chilling at 68, 69, or 70 in my big fat V8 Tahoe. And I'm good, man. And I let all the bozos go around me. And the two main reasons that I'm in the slow lane, number one, is if there's an emergency with my vehicle, I can always just pull over onto the shoulder, or I can exit at the very next exit. Or if there's a medical emergency in my vehicle, like maybe my daughter's feeling sick or something like that, hey, I could pull over immediately, help her, or exit the very next exit as well. Here's a prom story for you. So this young couple a few years back, prom night, and they're hanging out at the prom. Something happened. I don't know. They got into an argument, and they leave, and they're driving while arguing, and he's upset. So he starts being an idiot and deciding he's going to start speeding. I think it was because she brought up the topic of, well, maybe we should break up. And he doesn't like that. So he's speeding. She freaks out. She starts calling her girlfriend. She's talking on the phone. She's crying. He's going fast. And sure enough, he crashes the car. They were in a convertible with the top down. Okay, here's the crazy part. They crashed into a guardrail of some sort and ripped the guardrail apart. The car gets caught in the guardrail somehow as they're hanging over the overpass. And both of them died. Yes, they were buckled in, but now the car is hanging over the overpass. And everybody driving under the overpass obviously slows down to 3, 4, 5 miles per hour. It's not directly hanging over the overpass, but it's off to the side to where you could still get under the overpass. But there it is, a car hanging there, and they're seeing their dead bodies strapped in by the seatbelt as they're driving by. I saw the photographs of it. It was absolutely wretched. It was horrible seeing those photographs of those dead teenagers. All because he drove emotionally and decided to speed. They both died for it. A while back, there was this 19-year-old girl who got a ticket and her license suspended for driving 90 miles per hour and like a 40. Okay, so this is at the beginning of the summer. And she, the judge takes away her license. Okay, so when your license is suspended, you are not allowed to drive. Well, it turns out she was going to be a camp counselor at like this performing arts camp a couple hours away up in the mountains. So she goes to this summer camp, and she's there that week. Oh, by the way, she drove her car to the summer camp illegally because she doesn't have a license. She's at the camp, and midweek, the camp director asks her to go down the mountain into the town and buy some extra supplies. She gives her this list of, things to purchase. Well, the 19-year-old asks the camp director if she could take a couple campers with her. I'm sure you know where this story's going. The camp director actually says yes. So the 19-year-old camp counselor loads into her car, I think a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and the camp director's 10-year-old son. And all four of them get into the girl's car. She doesn't require them to wear any seatbelts. And they're driving down the mountain or the hill up to the store. And the girl decides she's going to show off, and she starts picking up speed, going down the windy roads and stuff. And she takes this turn way too fast, cannot stay in her lane, just as a big, huge dump truck type of cement truck is coming up around the corner. He's going about 30 miles per hour, coming up around the bend, I should say. She loses control, hits him. Originally, they thought it was about 90, but it was a little bit less because she was in braking mode. Whatever, 80, okay. She hits the truck, and basically it just disintegrates the car, disintegrates all of the kids in it. And the story continues that they had 2 fire engines coming up the hill to the crash scene, and the fire chief was on the lead truck, and he got there first with his part of the crew. He said that the carnage was so bad all over the road that he immediately got on his walkie-talkie, told the other fire truck to turn around and go back to the fire station. Why? Because he had younger firefighters on that fire truck, and they were not used to seeing the type of carnage that they were about to encounter. And he didn't want them to be traumatized by what they were to see. So he had them turn around and go back. That's how bad the carnage was on that car crash. The wild thing is that the driver of the dump truck lived. He was severely injured, but he lived. Yeah, I know I'm grossing you out with some of these stories and stuff, but this is reality. This is what's going on out there. And every day I leave my house and I drive around town, I'm nervous because we have more cars in our area than we used to. More people are moving to this town, and they don't care. The majority of them don't care about other drivers. They're into their own little worlds. Their own little world includes the speedometer and the phone. And they're trying to get around town as fast as they can. And what do you say? You guys know it. I'm preaching to the choir. You're sitting out there listening to me talk, podcasting, and you probably experience the same things in your own town. In fact, some of you listening are probably part of the problem. So what are you going to do about that? Are you going to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I have to make some changes in my driving habits. I need to slow down, get from A to B safely, and allow other drivers to get from A to B safely. This is something that I'm really, really passionate about, because a car crash has got to be one of the stupidest ways to die, because so many car crashes are preventable, especially if you're driving defensively. So let's touch on that really quick for 15, 20 seconds. What is defensive driving? It's just looking out for the bozos out there. It's slowing down, paying attention, scanning left to right, checking your rearview mirror every 5 seconds, checking your speedometer every 5 seconds, and making it your best friend, and looking down the road 15 to 20 seconds to see what you might be encountering. That's what basic defensive driving is. And if everybody did that, there would be very, very few car crashes out there. When you're approaching an intersection, you slow down a little bit. Let off your gas pedal. Scan left to right, looking out for those bozos that might run that stop sign or that red light. Now, if you're that bozo who might be running that red light or that stop sign, you won't run the red lights or the stop signs, because you're going to see that it's red and you're going to say, red means stop, I'm going to slow down. Or a stop sign means stop, I'm going to slow down, make a complete stop, look left, right, left again, and then I'm going to proceed. It's really that easy. I mean, you have a driver's license, you passed your test, you watched your family or people that you respect drive when you were younger, and you pick up on how they drive, and then you tweak it and you leave the bad stuff that they were a bad example for behind, and then you pick up the good stuff that they were a good example of driving, and you absorb those. And you have to remember that most of us emulate the people who we respect. And if your mom or dad, you look up to them, you see that they have some bad habits, whether it's driving or anything else, there's a good chance that you're going to do what they did, because you might think, that's the way it's done. But we do have to go back and check that and say, have I been parenting the way my parents have parented? And I didn't like the way they parented me, therefore I'm not going to parent my kids that way? Or are you going to keep going with those bad habits and parent your kids the way that you were parented and you didn't like it? Sometimes the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, they say, right? Or the pineapple or the banana or whatever it is. Don't get me started. You see what I've done to myself? I've got myself all worked up. Hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I had to take a little time, a little more than considering I've edited this episode together. But anyways, while I was sharing a couple of these stories, I was very aware of another story that has just happened within the past couple of days. So I'm sharing these stories with you, but my subtext is I'm also thinking about this very fresh story that's still panning out because of toxicology reports. Haven't been released yet or even fully concluded yet. But I'm just going to go ahead and share the story with you. So there's this woman, she's 30 years old. She's a singer in Texas. She's been working on her country music for probably a decade, I guess. She has a 6-year-old daughter. She posted on Instagram the other day and Twitter while driving a number of posts. One of them saying that she had 36 miles in her tank, but 46 miles to go. So there she is driving distracted. And she's on her way through New Mexico trying to get to Taos, Taos, for a country music festival that she was going to be making an appearance at. She was hopefully an up-and-coming singer. She had a couple albums out and an EP. Been working on this for a long time, driving everywhere. Her mom had posted on Facebook just the other night. So she didn't have the luxury of a driver or airplanes and stuff like that. So she'd spent a lot of time on the road over the years. So anyway, she was very emotional in some of her video posts that she'd made in that day. And then 4 or 5 hours later, it's now 9 o'clock at night. I'm sorry. And she's driving down the road in the dark, and she rear ends the back of an avalanche, a pickup truck, slams into the back of it. She's on a 2-lane road. That means 1 lane going in each direction. Bounces off of it. I guess she cranks her steering wheel to the left, because once she rear ends it, she ends up going into oncoming traffic and slams right into a teenage driver, a 16-year-old girl coming home from work, and kills the teenager, including herself. The driver of the pickup truck that she rear-ended was not injured. Well, it turns out first responders came upon the scene, and the 16-year-old girl had her father working that night as a first responder. And he came upon the scene only to be shocked and surprised that it was his own daughter he found dead in her car. We don't know if this 30-year-old woman was on her phone at the time, but how can you not see the back of a pickup truck at night with his big, bright red taillights on? Maybe she was distracted. That's still going to be playing out. We'll find out once they release, the timestamps on her phone and all that stuff. But what we do know is she rear-ended the back of it. They said that speed played a factor, and then they said that alcohol played a factor. And they know for a fact, because it was reported by the sheriff, that the 16-year-old was the innocent victim of a horrible crash. So we know that speed and alcohol or distracted driving, none of those played a factor in the teenager. And they obviously breathalyzed, tested for alcohol for the driver of that avalanche that was rear-ended. But what we do know for a fact is the 30-year-old musician was arrested for DUI in 2017 and had one of those breathalyzer interlock devices, if that's what you want to call it. I should know this. It's a breathalyzer locking system. So what you have to do is you have to breathe into it for it to determine if you have any alcohol in your system before it allows the car to start. So we do know that she had that device on her vehicle. But for all we know, it was taken off, who knows, last year or months or weeks prior to her driving the other evening. So, but she was obviously speeding because she came upon that truck so hard and rear-ended it. And then obviously cranked the wheel and went into oncoming traffic. So she leaves behind a 6-year-old daughter and family and friends, and if you want to say fans as well. And they're both dead. And this sweet 16-year-old did not arrive at school the next morning, and her own father found her dead in the car. They were both dead on arrival of first responders. Speed, most likely alcohol, fatigue, because she said in the post, that one of her posts, that she had driven about 12 hours that day. She was very emotional in one of the posts, so if you add alcohol to it, that's going to heighten your emotions. Plus, the sheriff did say that alcohol was involved. And we know that, like I said, the teenager and the driver of the truck rear-ended, they had no alcohol in their systems or in their vehicles. So obviously, that leads us to this 30-year-old woman. What do you say to that? You got to slow down, stay off the freaking phone, pay attention, don't drive emotionally, obviously, and don't drive drowsy, because drowsy driving is impaired driving. That's all there is to it. Driving while impaired. Would you ever, let me ask you this. How would you feel if you were stuck in a hospital for 4 days, badly broken leg, maybe broken ribs, maybe a concussion, because somebody fell asleep at the wheel and hit you, and you found out that they were driving 12, 13, 14 hours that day, and instead of being a responsible driver, they decided to keep pushing the limits and keep driving and driving and driving until they find a hotel or a motel or something like that, a campsite. And they're so irresponsible that they hit you and put you in the hospital. Would you be furious? Of course you would be. I mean, I smell lawsuit, right? So DWI means driving while impaired, obviously by alcohol or drugs, but also by your own drowsiness. And yes, there are states out there that are convicting people who injure or kill other drivers because they are impaired by their own drowsiness. Have I driven 12 hours before? Yes, I've driven 12 hours before, but I've pulled over, taken breaks, 5, 10, 15-minute breaks. Recently, I drove from Nashville to Orlando. Took me 12 hours and 6 minutes, but I got plenty of rest the night before. I left at 3 in the morning. So I woke up, did a quick shower, got myself ready to rock and roll, left the house at 3 a.m., and I got to Orlando at 3 p.m. Instead of leaving at like 6 p.m., driving all night and trying to get somewhere by 5 or 6 a.m. You see the difference between the two? So I did sleep before I got into the car and I made my plan. But, most people, when they leave, they, want to try and drive all night. And I don't recommend that. You should drive probably no more than 8 hours a day. If you average 60 miles per hour, 60 times 8 is 480, maybe 500 miles. You say, what? 60 miles per hour? That's way too slow. No, what I'm saying is when you pull over for, a rest stop, gas up, food, pee breaks, all that stuff for the kids, and you get back out on the road, if you map out the miles versus the time, it comes up to about 60 miles per hour. So that's what I'm getting at. But like I said, I'm 68, 69, or 70 in my big fat V8 Tahoe, and I'm usually in the right-hand lane, just chilling. And that way I get all the bozos, away from me and in the faster lanes. By the way, here in Tennessee, the minimum speed on a freeway, the interstate, the expressway, it's all the same thing, just different nicknames. The minimum speed is 45. So you can't go out on the interstate, freeway, expressway any slower than 45. If you're probably a bozo and you need to you need to take it out to the city streets if you're going to go as low as 45 and get on one of the pikes, one of the highways that is not an actual interstate. So you're going to have to check, your state's laws on what the maximum and minimum speeds are out on your freeways. I can handle driving over 8 hours a day because I drive all the time for a living. I drive with a lot of teenagers out there on the road. I've done a lot of road trips with my daughters and stuff for their volleyball. So I'm pretty used to getting in the car and putting some hours out there on the road. But for the average person, I would not recommend probably more than, driving close to 500 miles in one stretch. You need breaks. You need to take your time. I'm going to do another episode probably on drowsy driving as well. So I won't go too into it because we're talking about speed today, but you really got to watch your speed. Check your speedometer every 5 seconds. Check your rearview mirror every 5 seconds. That way you'll see if people are coming up behind you and you know to move over to the right. But my recommendation is just staying to the right anyways is probably the wisest route to go. I remember I got a speeding ticket out here. I think it was in Rutherford County. It was a Sunday night, pouring rain, entering a construction zone, which obviously means you're supposed to slow down in a construction zone. Although there were no workers present at the time, thank goodness. But it was a 60 mile per hour, I believe, and I was going about 70 or so. And it's pouring rain. It's basically pouring sideways, which tells you I should have been slowing down anyways, whether there was a construction zone or not. But I'm not. I'm just being my bozo self. This was probably back in 2000, maybe, something like that. And obviously, cop pulls me over. He pulls me over, and he comes up to the window, and it's pouring out, raining sideways. I roll down the window a little bit, and he makes me roll down the window like pretty much all the way. And he asked me for license, registration, and proof of insurance. I said, yes, officer, gave it to him. He said, you know what you're doing here? I said, no, you're speeding in a construction zone. That's illegal. I'll be right back. I'm going to issue you a summons. Sure enough, he comes back, gives me a speeding ticket. And he wouldn't let me roll the window up, and I'm just getting pelted with rain. And I guess because he's the one standing out there. So he wrote me up for the ticket, I think 10 or 12 over. And sure enough, I had to pay $50 back then and go to a 4-hour traffic school class. But I still, to this day, I remember what the police officer taught on at that traffic school in good old Smyrna, Tennessee. It was 4 hours, and he broke it down to speeding, aggressive driving, drunk driving, and distracted driving. And I never forgot that. And the funny thing is that years later, I ended up owning a driving school. I teach driver's ed and traffic school. And those are actually the 4 topics that I touch on. And I touch on a little bit of, drowsy driving as well. But it's amazing that had an impact on me. And that was starting to be about the time where I really was looking in the mirror and saying, I have to change my driving habits, because I would speed out there on the road for all of my road trips. I think I got a ticket maybe 6 months after that in Fairfax County, Virginia, on a Sunday morning at about 5:30. I left the hotel because I had to get somewhere about 3 hours later, and I was probably going about 68 or so in a 55. And sure enough, I got a speeding ticket in Fairfax County, Virginia as well. And then they sent me, I think, the video. I may have had to do a video 4-hour class, and where you have to watch a video cassette and then mark down all the answers and send in the answers to them. Yeah, it's no fun getting a ticket, because you lose time having to go to court, time having to do a traffic school class, and you also part with your hard-earned money for traffic school and court fines and stuff like that. One more story for you here. It's out of North Carolina. Earlier this summer, 4 people, they're driving 2:41 a.m. That's pretty late at night, or early in the morning if you want to call it that. Driving a really nice Audi, and no one was wearing their seatbelt. The driver decides he's going to be a bozo, and he's flying down the road and loses control and goes to the left, which was a grass median. And the car is, I guess, sliding or rolling on the grass, catches an edge, and the Audi actually flips. And when it flips, it ejects all of the people in the car. And sure enough, they lost one of their friends, a 21-year-old man. And he died at the scene. 2 of the other 3 were life-flighted, and they lived. And that's the story that they're going to have the rest of their lives, It's pretty sad. So I've beaten you over the head with a bunch of these stories during this episode. It's all because I'm just trying to save your lives before you lose them. You have so many people who love you, who value you. And, if something was to happen to you and you were to die in a stupid car crash and you had a funeral, I have no doubt that there would probably be a couple hundred people who would show up to your service because they love you. Friends, family, co-workers, classmates, former neighbors, current neighbors, friends and family you hadn't talked to in years, but they loved you and they respected you and valued you. So many people come out of the woodwork, you would not believe it, or maybe you would, when someone dies, and they just come to pay their respects. So, you guys, slow it down, keep a lookout, keep your eyes scanning left to right. Make a plan, get from A to B safely, and say, I'm going to drive like a responsible human being and just get to work without going over the speed limit, without driving distracted, drowsy, impaired by alcohol or drugs, and just get there, man, and fulfill the mission that you're called to in your life. Nothing worse than cutting your life short because you're acting like a bozo out there on the road. I think I'll leave it at that today. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. And I'm Spanky the Driving Dude with All Things Driving. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, I think they call it Twitter, Insta Spam, or is that Instagram? Find us, stay in touch with me as well. Our website is Spanky'sDrivingAcademy.com. Thanks for playing today. Rock on and rock steady.